has an edge all his own. Only Edge Gel has 8 custom formulas to fit every shaving need. From tough beards to sensitive skin. For a close, comfortable shave, get an edge of your own. Ultimate closeness, ultimate comfort. That's the Edge. And for dry skin, try new Edge Extra Moisturizing Formula.
Is there a cat food that helps maintain cats' urinary tract health?
Cat Chow Special Care reduces urinary pH and provides low dietary magnesium. Purina Cat Chow Special Care brand cat food. Better care makes better cats.
Hey gang, today Lenny here is going to do 50,000 reps of my Abbott Back Plus. Where's the machine? I'll be right back.
At Target, you'll find everything you need to stay fit and healthy, like the Cardio Glide exercise machine by Westlow, Warner Vision's workout videos featuring Tony Little and Tammy Lee Webb, and the Body by Jake Ab and Back machine.
If you fit, you can do anything. The savings really measure up at Target.
NBC Must-See TV Tuesday is reaching new heights. On an all-new Wings, Roy's reunited with his long-lost son, that big guy from ER. And last week, 25 million Earthlings watched Third Rock from the Sun. Now, see what everyone's talking about and why the critics call it a hit the size of Jupiter.
I'm his mother. I thought you were his sister. Sister, mother, whatever.
Then, an all-new Frasier's dumping Niles for a new best buddy.
Now, just go home to my Maris. Oh, that's right.
Followed by an all-new Lara Cat, all-new NBC Tuesday.
This week, the showdown begins.
I am an innocent man.
I'm going to be here for a long time.
As the trial is about to unfold. Days of Our Lives, NBC Daytime.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Mac. I'm starved. Nice to see you, too. Like, really famished. Want a sandwich? My stomach's totally empty. Mac and cheese. Ma, I said I'm starved. Totino's Hearty Pockets? Yes.
Hearty's the perfect name for these new pockets packed with all the meats and cheeses they love. New Totino's Hearty Pockets. Try them out on your bottomless pit.
That was great. I'm stuffed. At least until dinner.
Take them from starved to stuffed with new Totino's Hearty Pockets.
Vault closes in 10 minutes.
I know. Mr. 3 here. I got the girl. I'm bringing her down. I don't got any time for any funny business.
Neither do I.
Three here. Don't move. the window.
That vault door closes and we can kiss this job goodbye.
I know it's the right combination. It has to be.
Got it. 7:51, 17. Hurry, go.
The door's secure.
Open that door, Mr. 2. In each tray, gentlemen, you will find over $25 million. Our own modest fee for this little caper. The black cards with the currency identify the serial numbers of every bill. You bring those cards to me, Mr. 5, Mr. 6, and Mr. 7. Start loading up the cash.
The girl got away.
Why didn't you call for help?
She broke my headset, sir.
Mr. 8, Mr. 9, there's a girl running loose somewhere upstairs. Find her!
There's another one. A cop. Traffic control, he landed his chopper on the roof. He must have seen me drop the girl.
And rendered for help? You are this close! Where is he?
He came in through the loading dock door.
If he landed a helicopter on the roof, how the hell did he get to the loading dock?
On the fire hose. He saw my face. Mr. 1. He's heading for the coin room.
4. Go with him. This time, you better kill him! Mr. 10, go to the loading dock. If that door is open, make sure the damn thing's closed so it won't open again.
We've got a problem.
You know how I feel about problems.
Take a look out your window.
Where's the cop?
About to be terminated. The question is, has he radioed for help?
I'll find out.
You know, you assured me this kind of thing wasn't going to happen.
Somebody screwed up.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
I'll take care of it.
philosophy during his My name is Ralph Story. On September 1st, 1939, the curtain was raised on what was to become the most spectacular event in the history of mankind. World War II started with the sudden attack on Poland by Hitler's Nazi Germany. The use of screaming Stuka dive bombers ushered in a new era of aerial warfare. Before World War II ended, 6 years later, 57 nations had become involved. Over 100 million men and women served in the armed forces of their respective countries, and millions of military personnel and civilians alike lost their lives. You now have a front row seat to the revealing story of how air power was used to defeat the enemy without the necessity for a land invasion. This is the true story, as told in first-person accounts by the military commanders who had been assigned the responsibility of developing and executing the bold strategies and daring tactics needed to bring about a decisive victory. Their leadership and skill was instrumental in the defeat of both Germany and Japan, a victory that brought an end to World War II. The monumental wartime decisions that the military and political leaders made changed the course of history.
I have received this afternoon a message from the Japanese government in reply to the message forwarded to that government by the Secretary of State on August 11th. I deem this reply a full acceptance of the Potsdam Declaration, which specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan. In the reply, there is no qualification.
Now, let's go back in time to the balmy days of early winter in beautiful Hawaii. The year is 1941.
Shipmates, today is the third Sunday of Advent, the 7th of December, which means that Christmas is not far ahead.
A grim prediction is about to come true. A World War I fighter pilot and visionary air leader, General Billy Mitchell, was an often outspoken advocate on America's military preparedness, and he stressed the importance of the development and use of air power. Many of his viewpoints, often controversial, later proved to be correct. Regrettably, nobody was paying any attention to him at the time. because much earlier he had made a prophetic warning that on some quiet, peaceful Sunday morning, while Americans still slept, the Japanese would attack Pearl Harbor from the air.
Man your battle stations. God bless you.
December 7th, 1941, one of the most tragic and unforgettable days in history. Pearl Harbor, the island of Oahu, shortly after 8 o'clock Sunday morning, Hawaiian time. Without warning, the Japanese launch a massive series of air attacks from their nearby aircraft carriers. The United States Naval Fleet and mainland operations are hard hit. A catastrophic and near mortal blow on all the American forces has been struck, and the result is chaos, destruction, and death. When the carnage of this tragic day is over, the grim toll of American casualties will be enormous. In the capsized battleship Arizona alone, 1,178 men have gone to their deaths. Their bodies will lie entombed in the ship as a permanent memorial. Many military facilities and airplanes have received shattering blows everywhere, and the defenses are helpless and ineffective against the Japanese surprise attacks. The American nation and its people are in complete shock and confusion. December 7, 1941, a day of infamy, will remain indelibly etched in the minds and hearts of all Americans. This day will change the lives of millions of people throughout the world forever. A great statesman once said, "There's no such thing as a good war." And General Curtis E. LeMay would certainly agree with that philosophy. During his illustrious and exciting career as a military leader and a commander, he was called upon to take part in developing the strategy and tactics necessary to defeat Japan and bring an end to the most devastating war ever fought. Early in his career, General LeMay's talents for planning and ingenuity brought him to the attention of his superiors, who recognized his natural leadership abilities. From his assignment as commander of an 8th Air Force bomb group in England, General LeMay eventually rose to the highest rank attainable in the United States Air Force, Chief of Staff. Why didn't anybody listen to Billy Mitchell?
He was considered something of an upstart and a maverick in the Army at the time. And he, I think, deliberately carried things far enough to receive a court-martial, to bring his case before the public. I think now that he has been generally recognized as being right all along, but unfortunately he's not alive to receive the plaudits he should have had then.
Well, what happened there on December 7th, 1941 should have proved to everybody that we should have a big, immediate Air Force, but the Air Force was still a small part of the Army. It was the Army Air Corps.
That's true. Before the build-up started, which was shortly before we actually got into the war, we had in the Army Air Corps about 1,200 officers, regular officers and reserve officers on active duty, and about 10,000 men. This force was expanded to 2.5 million, nearly 2.5 million. So you can see the tremendous job we had of scattering these few people around such a large force, of training the people, building the force, training them, putting it into combat. It was a tremendous job.
The shock and anger over the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor sent waves of patriotism and determination throughout America. It resulted in a mighty force of men and women who went into the armed forces anxious to do their part for the war effort. Both men and women from all walks of life joined the workforce at American defense plants to do their part to manufacture the equipment and supplies needed to supply their fighting forces. Their efforts produced ships, planes, tanks, and other essential materials of such superior quality and in such vast numbers, it resulted in a modern production miracle. A highly regarded young Army Air Corps officer by the name of Haywood Hansel was a top planner prior to and during World War II.
We got started in the planning business when the President wrote a letter to the Secretary of War and Secretary of the Navy. He wrote in this letter a request for the requirements in production to defeat our potential enemies. It was a very significant letter, and the most significant part of it was that word defeat. He didn't ask what it would take to defend ourselves. He asked what it would take to defeat our enemies, a very important difference. Now, the air power that existed in concept at that time stemmed pretty much from Billy Mitchell's statement that airplanes made it possible to overfly struggling armies on the ground and go initially to the basic interior structure of an enemy nation and bring about its collapse. On this general approach, we determined the number of bombs required to destroy the targets, the number of aircraft that would be necessary to deliver those bombs, time involved. When it added all up, it was a pretty staggering figure. We presented it to the General Staff, with General Marshall present, and the General Staff took vigorous exception to it. To man that force was going to require 2,140,000 people, which was a 42-fold increase in the Air Force. Not 42%, 4,200%. General Marshall held his peace, made no comment at all until the discussion had finally died down. And he said, "Gentlemen, I think the plan has merit." It was a moment of conception of the United States Air Force.
Before the war, Americans had a somewhat misleading idea of Japan and the Japanese. Japan was thought of as a picturesque little country filled with cherry blossoms and dotted with beautiful temples and ornate Shinto shrines. The Japanese people, it was understood, were exceptionally well-mannered. They made a fetish of politeness. Practically all of their houses, we thought, were made out of bamboo and rice paper. Japan, through centuries of isolation from the rest of the world, was little known to us, and America underestimated her ability to build a modern war machine. Bamboo and rice paper? The fact was, parts of her cities were more strongly built than our own. Periodically visited by earthquakes, the Japanese had investigated and put to use every modern scientific method of building shock-proof structures. Japanese industry became westernized after the First World War. She learned how to mass produce. She not only mass produced cotton and silk, toys and machinery, but guns and tanks and planes, until over half of her entire industrial output was devoted to war production only. This, then, was Japan at war, a modern nation with a powerful and efficient war machine. The unorthodox fighting tactics and the culture of the enemy created situations that were completely at odds with the historic training traditions of United States Armed Forces. And this was also to be the proving grounds for one of the finest and most effective long-range military bombers ever designed, the B-29 Super Fortress. The original conception of the advanced new bomber needed for the future was a high-altitude airplane that would carry tremendous loads for great distances, non-stop, without refueling, and defend itself with its own firepower. During the late 30s, the foresight of General Hap Arnold and the Army Air Force planners succeeded in putting in motion the plans for developing the most advanced and efficient new bomber in the world, the new B-29 Super Fortress.
The B-29 was put into production before they ever flew a prototype.
You mean they never tested it?
Consequently, no testing at all. We tested it as we flew it in combat. So this required, in addition to the normal maintenance you have in a new airplane, all of the modifications that had to be made to the design to sort of really do its job. So that took time away from the combat hours that you really want to use it for. In addition to that, you had crews that were not trained on the airplane because it came out of the factory just before they came overseas with it. So you had to apply some time to train these crews. And the first position for combat was in Western China, with bases in India and advanced bases up in China.
Japan's early long-range plans for the conquest and domination of the Far East proved to be an effective advantage for them and an incredible problem for the Allies. It denied the Allies access to territories where forward bases could be built. Pressure was mounting to launch effective air strikes against Japan. This pressure contributed to the decision to establish a B-29 operation on the mainland of China. The heads of the Allied powers reached an agreement with General Chiang Kai-shek to build airstrips in China for the new B-29 superforts now coming off the production lines in the United States. But construction of the bases was a nightmare. The runways were built with no heavy equipment, no bulldozers, trucks, or cranes. The Chinese built the airstrips as they had built roads for centuries by hand. Thousands of peasant laborers, young and old, were needed to lay a rock mosaic inch by inch for over a mile. The most primitive construction methods were used to enable the world's most advanced weapon of war to fulfill its mission by defeating the enemy with air power. General Kenneth B. Wolfe, the highly regarded project commander responsible for the development of the B-29, was placed in command of the first B-29s assigned to China. The few combat missions flown under General Wolfe demonstrated that the supply problems would be insurmountable. In late August of 1944, Major General Curtis E. LeMay, an experienced combat leader, noted for his hard-nosed, daring, and innovative tactics, was placed in command of the B-29 bomber operations in China. But the logistical nightmare continued. All supplies to support the operation, including gasoline and bombs, had to be flown in over the treacherous Himalayas by available transport planes and bombers.
It was a completely futile operation except for its political purpose. The airplanes were coming off the line. They had to go somewhere. We didn't have any bases that would permit us to attack Japan except China. The Marianas were not yet captured, although they were to be captured for the purpose of basing B-29s there.
You were sort of going into Japan by the back door through India and Burma.
Much so, very much so. It was a political motivation, really, a military political motivation. If those B-29s were sent to MacArthur, as he was screaming for them, we'd never have gotten them back. If they went to MacArthur, they'd have to go to Nimitz. If they went to Nimitz, we'd never get them back either. So the whole concept of a strategic air war against Japan, with the same general purpose that we had in view to start with, to cause the defeat of a modern nation without an invasion. This was our purpose. It would never have been possible to achieve it if we had diverted those forces to those theater commanders.
As the history of World War II unfolded, it became painfully evident that changes would have to be made in traditional military command structures. The military leaders agreed that the B-29 operations in the Pacific would be of such critical importance that they should be placed directly under the control of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in Washington, General Hap Arnold commanding. At the beginning of the war, the Allies had agreed to concentrate their efforts toward fighting the war in Europe and defeating Germany while maintaining a holding action against the Japanese in the Pacific. Now, with the European conflict having reached the point where the Allies were confident that victory over Germany was certain, they agreed to commit more personnel and equipment to the war in the Pacific. In August of 1943, at a meeting in Quebec, Canada, Allied leaders and their combined chiefs of staff made the decision that the American B-29 bombers met all the specifications necessary to carry the war direct to the mainland of Japan. Once that decision was made, the B-29s were given a top priority production classification. This resulted in an accelerated all-out effort to get the plane into mass production and then deliver them to the training units. The final phase of World War II had its beginning in the heartland of America. An elite group of America's finest young aviators was selected and sent to bases located principally in Nebraska and Kansas. This group included hand-picked battle-wise combat veterans, West Pointers, and graduates of Army Air Force flying and technical schools. America's hopes of ending the war with Japan now was tied to the success of the B-29 Superfort and its crews of courageous young airmen. They were being called on to complete a difficult mission, defeat a stubborn and fanatical enemy. The new crews were not only training for combat, they were also being required to flight test the new plane, report on malfunctions, and identify modifications necessary to make it combat ready. America was well into the third year of war before sufficient numbers of the new B-29s with trained crews were available to be transferred to bases now available in the Marianas. It was 5 in the morning, and they were on their way. The chaplain gave each of the crews a St. Christopher medal. Christopher is the patron saint of travelers, he explained before he blessed them. And if there's one thing you boys are going to do, it's travel. This was the takeoff for one of the greatest mass flights in history. First lap from Grand Island, 1,321 miles westward to Mather Field, California. Mather Field was their POAE, Point of Aerial Embarkation. Here, the crews had to go through a final inspection line checkup. Then they were ready for the second lap, from Mather Field to Pearl Harbor, 2,415 miles farther west. On this first overwater hop, it was the navigators who were on the spot. With all their fancy equipment, their minds still had to make the final calculations. An error of 2 degrees would wind their ship up over nothing but ocean with empty gas tanks. Diamond Head, right on the nose. Good old navigator. The crews relaxed. Now they began to think about hula girls and the beach at Waikiki. At Pearl Harbor, however, they found themselves restricted to the airfield. The only hula girls they saw were painted on the doors of the PX, for something much bigger was in the making. In an office on that same field, a new bomber command was being born. The 21st, Brigadier General Haywood Hansell commanding. Now, among this group of born leaders was a young man whose claim to fame, among other accomplishments, was piloting the first B-29 into that Pacific theater. Arriving as a major, he rapidly advanced through the ranks and was destined to have a brilliant future in the Air Force. He retired a 4-star general, General Jack Catton. I'd like to take away that rank for a minute and bring you back to Major in that first flight out into the Pacific Theater. You remember it?
I do. I'll never forget it, and I'll go along with that fine. We flew to Mather in California, Mather Field here in California, near Sacramento, and flew from there out to Hickam, Honolulu, Hawaii, from there to Kwajalein, and from Kwajalein out to Saipan in the Marianas.
You remember the arrival in Saipan?
I'll never forget it. It was one of the big thrills of my life. we'd had kind of an interesting experience in Kwajalein. Kwajalein, as you know, is a very small island. It had a 5,000-foot coral strip that they'd fought for and gotten for us. They were operating B-24s out of there, but the interesting point was that nobody had seen a B-29. None of those people had seen a B-29. The airplane was still classified. So when we landed there, of course, the military police secured the area, put a rope around the airplane, and kept people away from it. And the next morning, when we came out to take off to head out to Saipan, there was a big sign in front of my airplane with an arrow pointing to an airplane in an adjacent parking place, which was a B-24. And the sign read, "This is a B-24, a proven combat airplane. Visitors are welcome." But when we left Kwajalein for the last leg of our flight, as we approached Saipan, we were met by a group of American fighters, P-47s that were on East Field in Saipan, and they were the first airplanes into the island after it had been secured. And those great guys and those jugs came out and, you know, got on either side of the airplane and a formation of a V in front of us and took us on over the island so we could fly by and have everybody take a look. And then we did a 9270, came back in and landed. And as we approached the runway, you could see literally, and this is hard to believe, but there were thousands of Marines and Army personnel lining the runway on either side of the runway, literally thousands of people. And it really impressed us with our importance and our responsibility, because a great deal of human suffering was encountered in taking these islands, which were so important to our oncoming strategy. And we realized that we had to do our job and do it very well.
Well, the first element of the 21st Bomber Command has arrived. When we've done some more fighting, we'll do some more talking. Thank you.
When I got to the Marianas, I was aghast because so far from having a finished base, we had almost nothing. Of the two bases, one of them was useless. The other one had one runway, 8,500 feet long, but only 7,000 feet of it was paved, and about 40 hard stands instead of 80. We hadn't been there but a short time when the Japanese fleet forayed into the Philippine Sea and caused a tremendous amount of disturbance in the Navy command. They didn't know where the Japanese fleet was or what to do. I had about 40 B-29s, not enough to launch an attack against Tokyo, but I was very uncomfortable sitting there with that much force without doing anything. I was very much afraid that Admiral Nimitz would take advantage of the emergency clause. There was an emergency clause in the Joint Chiefs of Staff command arrangements, which said that a theater commander can take command of the B-29s at any time that he feels that it is a major emergency. and notify the Joint Chiefs of Staff to that effect.
So now perhaps you've set the scene for Hap Arnold's insistence that in the Pacific things were going to be different, weren't they?
This was the great lesson that General Arnold learned from his experience in Europe. Do not permit the strategic air forces to be diverted to tactical purposes.
With American forces having retaken the Marianas, this put the B-29 forces within striking distance of Japan for the first time. After 6 months of liberation, the once peaceful and romantic island of Guam began to take on the signs of earlier days. However, the natives returning to their villages found themselves now sharing their tropical paradise with another group of Americans who were there to preside over the final phase of World War II. The American service personnel stationed on the tropical islands in the Pacific had to resort to their tremendous versatility, ingenuity, and resourcefulness to supply the necessities of life for their home away from home. The 21st Bomber Command was ready to hit its first target.
Our target for today is one of 3 of the Nakajima aircraft plants located 11 miles west of Tokyo.
The men had hoped the first one would be Tokyo, and they were delighted. But they weren't kidding themselves, not even those who'd been over Berlin or Ploesti or Vienna. London to Berlin and back was 1,000 miles. But Saipan to Tokyo and back was over 3,000 miles. Crew chiefs and maintenance men worked right through the afternoon and night. The ordnance men fused the payload. Dawn. The coolness reminded them of that other dawn not so long ago in Nebraska, only now they were sweating. Each superfort carried well over 7,000 gallons of gas, more than 6,000 rounds of ammunition. With their great load of 500-pound general-purpose bombs and incendiaries, they weighed almost 70 tons apiece. This was the final lap of the long mission. Over 10,000 miles, almost halfway around the world, to return a visit that had been paid to Pearl Harbor 3 years before. Pearl Harbor was on their minds now, the 2,000 American dead, Hickam Field in flames, the Arizona, the Oklahoma, the Pennsylvania. And there were other things on their minds. There was the triumphant feeling of being the first, the advance guard of a long procession of superforts that would smash Tokyo. There was the grim satisfaction of making the enemy eat its words. Tokyo, the Japanese High Command had broadcast, is out of range of land-based American bombers. And there was the uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. 1,600 miles lay between them and the target. What kind of defense would be put up? How much flak? How accurate? 1,600 miles lay between the target and getting back to Saipan. How many of them would get back? Six hours later, through the clouds, they saw it. Fujiyama, ancient symbol of Japan. But here come some modern symbols, phosphorus bombs, and flak, and fighters. Inside a superfort, you can't see its guns. You fire by remote control. But the guns are there. Now, below them is Tokyo. Within a radius of 15 miles of the Imperial Palace live 7 million Japanese. But it isn't imperial palaces these men are looking for. In the suburbs of Tokyo is the huge Nakajima aircraft plant.
No part of the Japanese Empire is now out of our range. No war factory too remote to feel our bombs. The battle for Japan is now underway with full speed ahead.
In a time of war, every day has its triumphs and its tragedies, but sometimes there are discoveries too. And one day, the B-29s out in the Pacific fighting the war against Japan discovered something, a phenomenon, and a brand new word was added to our language, jet stream. How did you discover the jet stream?
Well, it was our first mission against Japan, and our target was Tokyo. And after we had flown formation and punched two fronts and got to the climb point, which is just south of the island, we started our climb, climbing to 35,000 feet, a very high altitude for 1944. And as we were climbing, I kept getting corrections from my navigator. 5 degrees left, please. 7 degrees left, please. 10 degrees left, please. And for a pilot who's done a lot of flying, you know, either that navigator's lost his mind or something very strange is occurring.
You're flying in like a crab.
Yeah, we're flying
sideways.
In just exactly like a crab, and actually our initial point, the place where we start our bomb run, was Mount Fuji. And Mount Fuji was sitting up very majestically and very clearly above the clouds, and we could see it from a long way out. And as we were climbing, there was Fuji, and I kept going like this and like this and like this. We had about a 35-degree correction in, and we were drifting that far to get to Fuji. And we had no idea that the winds at those altitudes would be so extreme. And what we were encountering was a jet stream with speeds of up to 110, 115 knots. Made it very difficult for us.
General J.B. Montgomery, known as Monty to a lot of the people in the Air Force, was the Deputy Chief Operations of the 20th Air Force. General, maybe I should first ask you what the Operations Officer of the 20th Air Force does. I mean, what is an ops officer?
The ops officer is responsible for combining your attack forces into the target system. So he has to know what the objectives are. He has to know what your force is capable of doing, and therefore he is able to plan the missions and then to put out the field orders to the people who are going to execute them. And then after that mission is carried out, he is responsible for what we call the mission critique, where we bring the people who led the elements in there and analyze it and have them give their opinions as to the efficiency of the planning and what could be done to improve the mission.
So you're not only the planning officer, but you had to review it afterwards.
Review it afterwards. And he also, as being the operations chief, has to be responsible for gathering the target information, which put the photographic reconnaissance under him, and for running the weather recon airplanes into the Japanese area to find out enough information so that the forecaster, we call them the wind guessers, could give us a forecast of what the target was going to be weather-wise when we got there.
As the commander of the B-29 forces in the Pacific, General Curtis E. LeMay was a tough, no-nonsense combat leader who had developed a reputation for his innovative and creative tactics in planning the air strikes against the mainland of Japan. Under his command, many nagging problems were solved, among them procuring the huge amount of supplies needed to support the massive operations, both by going through normal supply channels and sometimes by going around them. A major change implemented at the Marianas bases was the introduction of a centralized maintenance system to modify and repair all B-29s. This system proved so effective that the amount of time each plane could fly combat missions was substantially increased. General Curtis LeMay, working with his Navy counterparts, organized an effective air-sea rescue network using ships, submarines, and planes to rescue flyers forced to bail out or ditch in the Pacific. It extended from the shores of Japan to Iwo Jima. The operation proved so successful, it was credited with saving the lives of over 600 flyers. It was a naval war, according to almost all the historians. Didn't you feel like an underdog going out to the Pacific in the Air Force?
Well, in some respects, yes. We were supposedly to be supplied by the Navy, but there are many cases where we felt they could have done a little better for us. For instance, when Tommy Powell arrived at his wing on Guam, the Navy was supposed to prepare the facilities for it. And all that was there was a strip of coral down through the jungle, which the crews slept on the first night. But by and large, the Navy pick and shovel people helped us when they could. The Seabees got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, for instance, and hauled bombs for us from the ships to the hard stands. We skipped the bomb dumps. The Marines did likewise for us. So we got along.
The scene is the 21st Bomber Command on the island of Guam. The time is April 1945, and here's General Catton to tell us what's happening. Which one is you?
Well, this is Jim Seaver. He is a colonel, and he is briefing weather to General LeMay and his operational staff, along with intelligence, so the general can make the proper decision on what priority targets will be hit based on the best weather situation.
How did he know what the weather was going to be?
Well, there were very few ways to determine what the weather was going to be. The way we had to do it was to constantly run B-29 weather reconnaissance airplanes up and around where the weather generated so that they could provide information to Jim so he could make the forecast for the boss, General LeMay.
And General LeMay, chewing his cigar, in charge of this briefing. Now, what is accomplished here?
Well, what's happening here is we've already briefed on the missions that are available to him, the targets, then the weight of force that we intend to use. The details of the mission are briefed to the general. He takes a look at the weather, and he decides how the force will be applied in the next strike.
This is a planning session for tomorrow's mission.
It's a decision session,
And the decision is over?
He has made his decision, and as I recall this scene, I was to fly this mission because we were going to fly a new tactic we are going to employ to assemble our formations much closer to the targets.
Why?
So, well, when you fly 6 hours of formation from your takeoff point to landfall, it's a very tiring process, and it's a very heavy use of fuel, which was very precious to us.
Lieutenant Colonel Catton's combat experience helps the planning staff iron out operational kinks. Takeoff time is flashed to the controller, who coordinates the vast network of communications gathered here at the heart and nerve center of command. A timetable of statistics for each wing, as planned and flown, is recorded from hourly reports on the status panel, beginning with takeoff time. To veteran crews, it's just another day's work. One more 1,500-mile haul up and down the ruddy Pacific. 15 hours, 7,000 gallons, 4 engines, 11 guys. At Tinian, 100 miles north, 2 more B-29 wings prepare for takeoff. 134 aircraft from the 58th wing, 100 more from the 313th wing. At Saipan, a few minutes later, the veteran 73rd Wing lines up for takeoff. 153 more bombers are added to the mission's striking force. Those B-29 takeoffs are a tough sweat. That first long moment is the worst. Some say it takes luck, like a wife's stocking, to beat it. The navigator sets the course, logging island checkpoints as they climb past the northern Marianas. Flying at low altitude, the B-29s are approaching the bad weather belt, where unreported storms and cold fronts appear suddenly across the bomber course.
Pilot to crew, we're going to start our climb. Check oxygen equipment. Tell Buck he better get out to his doghouse.
As they begin their slow climb to altitude, the crews prepare for the vital business ahead. And from now on, until they come off target and head home, it's all business. The central fire control system is warmed up, superhuman brain power at the flick of a switch. Each gunner flexes his sights and tries the coordinated fire controls with a few short bursts to clear the guns. After pushing up to altitude, the bombers arrive close to assembly point. Air in the pressurized cabin is comparable to 8,000 feet, but oxygen masks are adjusted and ready for instant use. Lead bombers begin to circle, dropping their new smoke markers for assembly. Lieutenant Colonel Catton observes this part of the tactical plan of action. From various zone positions, the groups form on their lead ships in 9 or 11 plane waves, which head for initial point. The big parade is on. Landfall is picked up, along with the first flak from enemy coastal batteries. Fujiyama, the familiar white beacon, marks the turn for initial point. Flak becomes heavier and more accurate. And now the first enemy planes appear, diving head-on into the formations. Some are suicide fighters trying to ram our bombers. Other fighters drop phosphorus bombs set to explode in front of the oncoming B-29s. From the turn at initial point, the tight bomber waves move steadily on and get ready for business. Flak and fighters fall off, but those clouds are beginning to move in, and it looks worse ahead. Then, just east of Hachioji, the Tokyo area breaks clear. The bombardiers begin to draw a bead on the target. The planes sit tight for the bombing run. The first waves of B-29s have already found their objective. Succeeding bomber groups add their devastation to the smoking targets. The tactical plan is now an accomplished fact. The bombers turn and go downwind, across the bay, and a tailwind speeds them south down the Chipa Peninsula. Many hours later, the bomber wings are nearing their bases. Exhausted crews wait out the last endless hour when the time seems to stop. Their position is radioed in, and the controller gets word of the approaching flight. At last, the familiar Marianas appear on the horizon. The bombers fly across Guam and turn into the landing pattern. It's good to feel the sudden humid heat, to be among the living, swapping stories with the ground crew. But some of those B-29 crews won't be able to talk it over today. 11 men and a bomber that didn't quite make it. The rescue squads tear away the hot metal. Somehow, in that burning wreckage, a man has lived to feel those gallant, eager hands. 1 life saved and 10 lost. That's part of today's toll. And there were many other days and nights that took their toll of young American lives. When those first B-29 crews arrived in the Pacific, they had a lot of enemies. more than just the Japanese. There was the long supply line all the way back home across the Pacific. There were the green crews and the untried airplane and the unknown weather. But perhaps the most important enemy was the Pacific Ocean itself. What did you have in between the Marianas and Tokyo?
Well, we had some enemies. The Japanese, who were involved in the island chain on up the look. For example, Iwo Jima, which became a very important area place for us. For example, let me show you, Ralph, that these distances are really substantial. From the Marianas, for example, to Tokyo, some 1,600 nautical miles. So you're looking at a 3,200-mile flight, a mission that's going to take you on the order of 14 to 16 hours, depending on circumstances. And when we started our missions in the early or the latter part of 1944, we didn't have any rescue, very, very little.
And you didn't have Iwo Jima.
And we didn't have Iwo Jima. We had to avoid Iwo Jima because there's a substantial garrison of Japanese troops there. And they had flak and they had fighters, you know. So yeah, we avoided Iwo Jima and Chichijima, an island up here. So the problems really were a tremendously long flight over a very hostile ocean. And if, in fact, we did have difficulty over the targets, and we frequently did get battle damage, we had 1,600 miles to get home. And that's a long, long way.
The savage battle waged for Iwo Jima was one of the most costly and lives lost in American history. It became obvious to the leaders of the Allied forces that the closer the battles got to the Japanese mainland, the more fierce the resistance became. Battles are fought with men using guns, tanks, ships, and planes. Combat cameramen, at great personal risk, armed only with a camera and a tremendous amount of courage, filmed the actual battles on the ground and in the air as they took place. Years later, you are an eyewitness to historic events and battles that changed the world forever. General Catton, why was Iwo Jima so important to the air offensive against Japan?
We were able to put fighters on Iwo Jima, P-51s, which provided escort to the bombers. Fighter escort to the bombers. We had two groups of P-51s here once the Marines had secured the island. And I got to tell you, it wasn't much after they had it secured that we had those airplanes up there.
Iwo Jima was called the Hot Rock, a black, gritty pork chop halfway to Japan. 8 square miles, bought and paid for by our Marines. We made some quick changes, cutting away that sulfurous volcanic crust and rolling Iwo's surface into one enormous blacktop. 3 big airstrips now launch our P-51s for bomber escort over Japan. Out on the line, the P-51s are warming up for the longest fighter flight on record. 7 hours on one engine, extra belly tanks, extra nerve, and stamina in the cockpit. About the time our bomber wings are passing Iwo Jima, the pea-shooters are taking off, scheduled to join them 3.5 hours later off the shores of Japan. After a rendezvous at Kita, the P-51s head for assembly point, led by B-29s designated as navigator ships. Did you have control over the fighter aircraft as well as the bomber?
Yes.
Unlike England.
Well, we did, and they served us very well. It was quite a chore for the fighters to get up there that far away. A single-seater airplane, all over water. We'd pack a gaggle of them onto the end of a P-29, and they would lead them up there, turn them loose to do their escort mission, and then hit ground targets on the way out, pick them up at the exit point, take them back to Iwo. The weather situation is usually bad. We usually had a couple fronts to go through on the way up. And well, we had a method of spreading out to go blind through these fronts. It didn't always work out the way it was supposed to be. We lost 27 fighters on one mission just going to weather through the fronts.
Off the coast of Japan, fighter escort appears with its navigator ships, which now turn off to wait for the fighters' return at rally point. The Mustangs climb in formation to take positions above the boxes of B-29s. Before long, the first Japanese fighters appear. What did you do with the fighters in the Pacific that you couldn't do in Europe?
Well, we had a different situation. In our gunnery platform was different. We had a fire control system on the B-29 that the B-17s didn't have. And I set the fighters up to force the Japanese fighter attacks around to the rear, where the computer on our gun sights would operate, and we could track them properly. And we got very accurate gunnery out of the bombers.
With the big bombers homeward bound, the P-51s dropped down for strafing runs, concentrating on definite objectives from here to the enemy coast. Skimming along at maximum speed, the fighters pair off and go to work, cutting vital Japanese lifelines, blasting away at communications, radio installations, power lines, swooping down on enemy transportation, railroads, marshalling yards, small suburban factories. Then on to shipping targets, freighters, fishermen, trawlers, harbor and coastal craft. Destroyer or lugger, it's the same enemy. After strafing, the fighters climb back to rally point and the waiting B-29 Navigator planes. It's several hours before Iwo comes into sight, and fuel gauges are down close to empty, but fighter spirits begin to rise. They wind up and finish with a kick, coming past Suribachi at whiplash speed and zoom into their victory rolls. Once over for each Japanese plane down. The strategic location of Iwo Jima not only provided a base for the short-range fighter planes, but also provided a safe haven for planes in trouble who would not be able to make it back to their base. It also provided crews with a welcome feeling of security in knowing that if they had to bail out or ditch the plane, they would be quickly rescued from the treacherous Pacific. But despite all the planning and contingencies, last-minute tragedies did occur. There was bitter irony in seeing a plane and its crew make it back to Iwo Jima from a dangerous mission over Japan, only to crash and burn on landing. A lot of people don't know that the B-29s had another purpose there, which was to do some mining of those waters around Japan. Where did that happen?
We mined all of the harbors, of course, but the main entry into the Japanese islands was through this choke point right here. This is Kyushu, and this is Honshu, Shikoku, the main islands. These are called the Shimonoseki Straits. And we had one B-29 organization, the 313th, on the island of Tinian, that became expert in mining from the air. And they were our mining wing, and the result of their activity was such that literally no surface or even subsurface movement in the waters surrounding Japan. They were absolutely choked off from any help from outside.
So this is another effect of air power in shortening the war that many people might not realize.
Well, you're probably right. Aerial mining was extremely effective. We blockaded the islands.
The Marianas-based B-29s carried out the most concentrated mining effort ever undertaken by any means in any war. This campaign began at the end of March 1945. Approximately 1,600 of the B-29 sorties flown during the final months of the war were devoted to aerial mining missions. More than 12,000 mines were dropped in less than 5 months. They virtually clogged the navigable waters in and around the Japanese home islands. So thoroughly were the waters surrounding Japan saturated with this super-sensitive underwater menace, it was often impossible to move ships from one dock to another, let alone carry out their function in support of the nation's economy. With the population headed for wholesale starvation, the Japanese made suicidal attempts to run the blockade and lost more ships. Only 3 of 22 shipyards remained open for operation. Toward the end of the war, Japan had less than 800,000 tons of serviceable shipping with which to supply the needs of the entire nation. The change in the tactics and the strategy of the use of the B-29 in the Pacific is one of the great untold stories of the World War II. And let's ask General Montgomery why the B-29, designed, I believe, as a high-altitude bomber, why it came down and down and down in altitude to become a low-level bomber, a revolutionary change and one the plane wasn't even designed for.
You're correct. I came back from a mission in February of '45, and General May took over from General Hansel on the 19th of January, '45. So I came back from this mission, and instead of bombing the Nakajima plant west of Tokyo, we had to drop our bombs by radar on a secondary target, and I said, General, I don't think this mission is going to succeed. He said, sit down, let me tell you what I have in mind. Now that's when he told me that he had in mind going to a broadside attack against the urban areas using incendiary bombs and bombing at low level at night.
March 10th, 1945, just past midnight, as the Japanese slept in their island cities, an endless, determined stream of B-29 bombers bore down on mainland Japan. One of the most devastating and massive low-level incendiary air attacks of World War II was unleashed. It was as stunning to the Japanese as the attack on Pearl Harbor had been to America. The firestorm raged over the city below. Within 1/2 hour after the attack began, the situation on the ground was uncontrollable. Hell had come to Tokyo. As the pall settled over Tokyo, Japan had been hit with the first massive incendiary raid by American air forces. Nearly 16 square miles of the city had burned out, an area the size of Dallas, Texas. It was later cited as a major turning point in the war's course. Well, civilians would say, why didn't you attack the military targets instead of the cities?
The targets we did attack were military targets, factories and production units in the cities. That's where the bulk of their war-fighting capacity was manufactured. And they had a little different system over there. We manufacture everything in a plant.
You mean a big factory?
Big factory, yes. They had an assembly plant, but around it they had these little industries. Every family would have a drill press or a little milling machine and do some particular operation in the kitchen. And then it all went into the plant for assembly. I did think something about non-combatant casualties. We dropped leaflets up there warning people of what they were going to do, and I think it had some effect.
What did the leaflets say?
Well, it in effect said, look, Mr. Japanese, we're not particularly mad at you, but we disagree with the government who started this war. We intend to destroy your city, and we suggest for your own safety you leave.
After the war, a special film was made which documents the tremendous destruction caused by American air power over Japan. The voice is that of Edward R. Murrow, and this is what he and the American public saw for the first time. General?
And what is the effect, the end result, of 322,754,000 pounds of bombs on a nation's economy? Judge for yourself. This is what happened to the Japanese aircraft industry. In September of 1944, Japan's production of aircraft and aircraft engines was 6 times greater than in 1941. Then came the B-29. By July of 1945, 57% of this phenomenal capacity had been destroyed. These were the famous Mitsubishi aircraft and engine plants in Nagoya. The aircraft factory was one of the largest in the world, bigger than Willow Run. Of 8 million square feet of productive floor area, 4 million square feet were destroyed. Following the initial B-29 strikes, a panic dispersal of the industry took place. By late spring of 1945, production tools and personnel had taken to the hills, causing further production stoppages. But by then, it was too late. The period of air attacks on Japan proper saw Army and Navy ordnance plunge to disastrous levels. In less than a year, production in the arsenals of Japan was cut in half. The shortage of steel was so acute that Army chiefs in the field had been told that heavy artillery manufacture was being discontinued. An order had been issued, practically forbidding the use of ammunition for training purposes. Even the belated and desperate effort to produce special weapons, such as kamikaze planes and suicidal one-man submarines, intended to repulse invasion of the Japanese home islands, were useless. The output of aircraft, armaments, and oil products had dropped to levels insufficient to support sustained defense. The destruction of a major portion of the plants in these industries made the possibility of recovery negligible. The Japanese war economy was bankrupt.
Why doesn't the American public know about the tremendous destruction of Japan that happened before the bomb? Was it because the atomic bomb was such a newsmaker?
Well, I think that's the main thing, and most people seem to think that the atomic bomb ended the war. Well, this is not exactly so. We, of course, have been reading the Japanese mail for quite some time, having broken their codes, and we knew that the Japanese government had approached the Russians long before the atomic bomb was dropped to have the Russians negotiate them out of the war. So they were defeated before the atomic bomb was dropped.
From the air?
Yes, with conventional weapons. Of course, the Russians didn't do anything about this request to negotiate the Japanese out of the war because I suppose they wanted to get into the war and transfer their armies to the Pacific and get in on the loot. Anyway, they did nothing. We, of course, couldn't say anything about it because that would have told the Japanese that we had broken their codes. So we were stalemate. What the atomic bomb did do was to break that stalemate. And as soon as that happened, the Japanese went to the Swiss, and in 10 days we had a ceasefire.
Reporters rush out to relay the news to an anxious world and touch off celebrations throughout the country. Washington is jubilant. And in Chicago, more than 1 million sing and dance in the streets in the biggest celebration the Windy City has ever seen. Joy is unconfined. It was 4 o'clock Pacific time in San Francisco when the announcement came, and people were quick to leave their offices for an impromptu, spontaneous celebration. But the greatest, wildest celebration of all was in New York's Times Square, where 2 million people, by far the greatest in the city's history, filled the streets all day waiting for the official word. A hilarious, happy throng, they cheered every rumor that it was all over. And when President Truman's announcement came at 7 o'clock, the lid really blew off. Tens of thousands of proud American flags dotted the square. And as the day wore on, hilarity reached a high peak. Far into the night, the happy crowd screamed their relief at the end of the greatest war in history. From early Tuesday morning, the celebration went on for 24 hours. New York never celebrated like this before, but never did they have a better reason.
The Allied fleet, approximately 400 vessels strong, received its ceasefire orders early on the morning of the 15th of August, 1945. Occupation began on the 30th. Guarded by a cover of aircraft and guns of the Third Fleet, Marines in blue jackets walked ashore at the Yokosuka Naval Base south of Yokohama. Brief formalities marked the official acceptance of the base. All across the Pacific, these were the days of rescue. Rescue not only for oppressed populaces, but also for Allied prisoners of war who had endured endless atrocities in hundreds of POW camps. Men from Bataan and Wake, the Aleutians, Marianas, Hong Kong, men of ships sunk at sea, of planes shot down in combat. The evidence piled up high as camp after camp gave up its surviving prisoners. Well-authenticated stories told of solitary confinement and torture. The most brutal methods were reserved for those from whom the enemy hoped to force military information. Red Cross packages were nearly all stolen by the guards. For thousands of homes the world over, there was to be cheery news. Due to the Japanese trick of not reporting numerous Allied prisoners, men long believed dead could flash the happy word of their survival. At the Yokohama hospital on September 11th, Tojo, the notorious Japanese leader, lay near death after shooting himself with an American pistol. The blood of a Yank sergeant helped save the ex-premier for trial as #1 war criminal. Tojo ordered the sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. His deed came back to haunt him less than 4 years later. This is how it was that day when history turned the corner into the future down a Tokyo street and the world was at peace. Most Americans assume that when those 2 atomic bombs dropped on Japan, that's what convinced the Japanese to unconditionally surrender.
It's a more complicated situation that we learned when I went in with the survey and talked to the surviving leaders and investigated the effects of bombing on all aspects of Japanese life. We learned then that the efforts to stop the war had started down within Japanese oligarchy. The emperor sat there, but he took recommendations and he did not direct. And they had what they call the Inner Cabinet, the Supreme War Direction Council. And those people kind of controlled everything. They were the operational crowd. And they advised the emperor what to do. Well, they were split. Why? Because the army, having broken our code and knowing when and where we were going to invade on the 1st of November, 45, and having moved enough people in there, and airplanes and equipment and supplies and bombs and troops, they were convinced they could defeat our invasion. So they were against any early stoppage of the war.
Was it the atomic bombs that convinced the army to give in?
The atomic bombs came in August, when we had largely destroyed their urban industrial complex. We had put 8.5 million people without homes into the field because we dropped leaflets on all of these targets and said, of these 10 targets, 2 will be destroyed in the next 10 days. Get out. They wouldn't get out of the first 2 because the government said no. But then thereafter, they left.
So in other words, the bombing of the Japanese cities ahead of the atomic bombs really brought about the surrender.
Ralph, exactly. 8.5 million went out without a place to live and without food. And that was a big factor. And that convinced the emperor and the keeper of the Privy Seal and things like that, that they had to stop the war, but the Army held on. Now, the 2 atomic bombs came and added emphasis and lubrication to the machinery to stop the war.
As we have seen, it was the effective and relentless use of air power that convinced the stubborn enemy that the loss of millions of additional lives was futile. And now, with the guns of war silent and planning for the further destruction of Japan at an end, Generals Curtis LeMay, Jimmy Doolittle, and Nathan Twining conducted a first-hand aerial survey of the destruction that the B-29 forces had inflicted on the mainland of Japan.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God.
The final sunset for the empire of the rising sun has come at last. This memorial in the beautiful Civic Center at Santa Ana, California, is typical of many erected in cities, towns, villages, and parks all across America to honor and remember its veterans, men and women who served and died for their country. Over 16 million Americans served in the United States Armed Services during the Second World War. Over 407,000 lost their lives. Almost 1 million were wounded, missing in action, or taken prisoner. How many hundreds of thousands of Americans would have been added to that casualty list, men who would have died on the beaches of Japan if a land invasion had been necessary?
officers battling crime. Or everyday citizens caught in peril.
The results are the same. Sudden terror.
Are you crying? Yeah. Grief.
Cover your eyes. Or beg for mercy.
Get me out of here! On September 22nd.
There's nothing else like it. Jackass #2.
What kind of university would keep a professor like Sherman Klump? He fraternizes with the junior faculty.
I bet you can stand for a big old whopper right now, huh?
He experiments.
We're back on Raw, and Edge had plenty to say. The WWE champion about John Cena moments ago. Yeah, but
of sophistication never attempt.
These ocean voyagers may even encounter more humans in the future.
A rise in sea temperature is all it would take for these snakes to widen their distribution to more populated areas like the California coast. Such a warming may indeed be happening. Another possibility is that via the Panama Canal, these snakes could reach the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, where they would surely thrive. In a changing world, these serpents of the sea are capable of almost anything.
Hello again. Now I need this, because I'm on the hunt for the only water snake in Florida that's venomous. Wow. They are pretty fast in the water. The water moccasin. It's also called the cottonmouth. Yes, he's doing it now. Look at that, he opened his mouth, and inside it's like white cotton wool. They use that to warn off predators. They don't want to waste their venom on us. They'd much rather save their venom for prey. This has been great fun for me, finding Florida's water snakes. I hope you've enjoyed it too, and you must join me again on Nigel's Wild, Wild World.
The Discovery Channel has a new face.
Hello, I'm Nigel Marvin.
Tag along with adventurer Nigel Marvin on his quest for curious creatures.
I'm swimming with a yellow anaconda.
Going face to face with dangers great and small.
They don't get much bigger than this.
Some more dangerous than others.
Please don't try this at home.
Animal Adventure charges back into prime time with Nigel's Wild, Wild World. Mondays at 8 Eastern and Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
Bellagio is the most beautiful place on the Las Vegas Strip.
We try our best to assist the guests with any requests that they have, as long as they are legal and moral.
I'll remember the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge the rest of my life. The awesomeness of the size and how little I felt.
It's like a little city. Anything that happens in a major city is going to happen here. Some of it not so good, most of it is good.
These trucks came in on rail cars, 7 rail cars per truck, and then they were offloaded and hauled in here in pieces.
Driving the 797 is like driving a Cadillac compared to some of the other trucks.
The 777 uniquely is an airplane that can do things that no other airplane ever could do.
They left at Rockefeller Center, and now they're all waiting in line to get in.
I actually watched it going up.
What more could you ask for than the grandest stage in the center of New York City, in the center of the world?
I'm in awe. I love it.
This mall is huge. It's the biggest building I've ever been in.
It's like a symphony orchestra screaming at you to part with your cash.
This is ground zero of American consumerism.
Ship is built safe, state-of-the-art. It has changed a lot since Titanic.
The outrageousness about the ship made me feel like you weren't really real.
Every time you turned around, there was something exciting happening.
If you've ever seen pictures of our first wonder, Bellagio in Las Vegas, chances are they've looked like this. Breathtaking nighttime views of cascading fountains of dancing water. Romantic and distinctive, visible from almost anywhere. You can watch this ambitious and ethereal water ballet every 15 minutes as it moves effortlessly to the music of Hollywood. And opera. The sprays reach 240 feet in performances choreographed by dancers and computers. This remarkable aquatic theater has been a dramatic Bellagio attraction from day one. When Bellagio opened in the fall of 1998, it was the first of a new generation of super casinos and set a new standard of excellence many believe may never be surpassed. The opulent gala resembled a coronation. Within 18 hours, 80,000 people came to look. Bellagio's opening was much anticipated because it was the first billion-dollar building in America. 1.8 billion actually. And in a town where what you see is often more representational than real, developer Steve Wynn chose to try something different. Bellagio left this land of make-believe behind and featured instead a level of sophistication never attempted here before.
It's an attitude that we wanted to build something that was new, unique, original, and at the same time would stand the test of time and was not simply a facade or a knockoff of some other place.
Rather than conform to Vegas's trendy and fantastic themes, Bellagio was designed to simply overwhelm you with class. That class would come at a price. Low-end rates of $159 to $799 a night, the highest in town. The thinking was, provide the best and they will come. In the heyday of the 1950s and 60s, there was a gangster mystique to gambling, but in time it was legalized and became a legitimate mainstream activity. Starting with the Mirage, a development frenzy began that saw 17 of the 20 largest hotels in the world pop up on the Vegas Strip. The dunes went down and Bellagio went up. In the first 3 months, Bellagio had revenues of $3 million a day, attracting the wealthiest travelers who might otherwise head for London, Paris, or Rome. Today, Bellagio generates more cash flow by far for the newly formed MGM Mirage properties than any Las Vegas resort. Less than half comes from the casino. When you arrive at Bellagio, it's like entering a grand old turn-of-the-century rail station. 2 Bellagio themes, flowers and water, are immediately obvious. What you next see may surprise you. Waiting her turn to go in and out of the revolving doors, a cleaning lady spends her day wiping fingerprints off the glass, so your first view and first impression are pure. Earlier that morning and every morning, caretakers have been polishing all the marble, replacing all the tired flowers, and making that signature $10 million Dale Chihuly glass sculpture sparkle, each one of its 1,200 hand-blown colored petals. When you check in, the front desk agent makes sure you are satisfied.
Well, sometimes happens that the guest shows up a day after or a day before, and his or her reservation has been canceled. So we try to see what we can do for them as fast as possible. The guest is never wrong.
The staff is enthusiastic.
It's just amazing to come to work every single day and see everybody's look on their face. Just awe. They can't believe they're here. They're just glad to finally be here and experience the Bellagio.
Employees have that same look because they are treated with the same respect they are asked to treat the guests. The exquisite employee dining room shares a kitchen with one of the resort restaurants. Becoming an employee is a highly selective process.
And for you to actually be chosen for your position is really quite something. And I really want you to feel that. Okay?
For that reason, they don't take chances. They bring in the most personable candidates, and then they train them to be courteous, neat and clean, and always to smile.
When Bellagio was opening, and they were interviewing initially, there was over 75,000 applicants to work at Bellagio. So there definitely was a message sent out that this is going to be a very special place.
Danny Gans was sold out. Last I checked. I can see if there are any tickets for the O show if you'd like.
A concierge requires specialized training. They get asked to do the impossible.
One time a royal family was staying here and they wanted to see a popular magic show here in town, and it was sold out. So we actually had to call the magician of the show, and with a little persuading we got them into the show. We try our best to assist the guest with any requests that they have, as long as they are legal and moral.
Anybody could recreate a building if they had the appropriate designers and enough money. That can be done. But training the staff, engendering the goodwill of the staff, is far, far more complicated.
The lobby and nearby casino maintain a constant buzz. But not far away, you can find tranquility. This is the Conservatory and Botanical Gardens, where over 85,000 flowers are never allowed to bow, not even once. The fragrance is alluring and subtly distributed throughout the resort. Nearly 1 million people stroll through here annually, flower fans, photographers, and lots of ladies in white.
Makes me feel pretty good that we're able to present something so beautiful, and we're able to do it so quickly. I mean, we can change things in and out, and we always have a large display of color, so it always looks beautiful year-round.
A staff of 15 cares for the conservatory daily. Every 2 weeks, all flowers are replaced, so this 14,000 square foot garden is in full bloom every day of the year. In the conservatory greenhouse, specimens arrive daily and are prepared for display as needed. When the nursery is largely bare, as it is now, that tells you everything in the conservatory is as fresh as it can be, day after day.
Just 3-4 minutes, we'll get you right.
In keeping with Bellagio's mission to touch all the senses and be a cultural destination, you can attend an exhibition in the middle of the desert of some of the finest artwork in the world. The Phillips Collection of Washington, D.C. offers impressionist and modern masters, European and American, from 350 years of art history.
it was decided that the gallery would be a wonderful place to offer exhibitions of museum collections that might not be widely seen. And bringing fine art into Bellagio itself would be something that had never been done in Las Vegas. It would set the Bellagio apart.
The Phillips is the first museum to be invited to participate in Bellagio's new series of 6-month loan exhibitions.
I think it was a real highlight of our trip, definitely a highlight. I really thought the art was beautiful.
I guess I think it's kind of a unique thing just because so much is weighted to the gambling and not really to the cultural aspects of things in Las Vegas. So I thought it was really refreshing to find something like that here.
Vegas, has this magical ability of keeping able to reinventing itself. And that is definitely the case today with a hotel like Bellagio, where Bellagio's core business is non-gaming business. And it has this incredible casino, gorgeous casino, and very successful, but it's part of the whole mix.
A resort's bottom line may not rely exclusively anymore on casino revenue, but most guests sooner or later are seduced by the sounds and lights, and they venture in, where they become winners and losers. The gaming environment is no longer smoke-filled, and the forbidden connotations are long gone. It is now primarily social.
I think the overall goal of almost all the guests is to enjoy themselves. They enjoy themselves in non-gaming activities, and they like to enjoy themselves when they do gamble. And the people that seem to have the most fun are the people that understand that gaming is a contest.
Some prefer to play individually, which can produce the most money for the casino, up to $25,000 a year per single quarter slot. You could win the big one or lose $200 in an hour. But the more passionate contests pit players against the house and each other. There is a built-in mathematical dealer advantage on most games called the edge. In roulette, theoretically, players lose an average $263 an hour for every 50 $100 spins. In blackjack, $120 an hour on 60 $100 hands. But there is no house advantage in this game. No matter the game, the house will ultimately win. It's just a matter of time and whose money. How much depends on your budget and your pride. But that's just the average player. You can beat the average. If luck is a lady, you can win. Most don't seem to really care about winning because they're enjoying themselves. Blackjack is any casino's most popular game. The rules are easy and skill matters. First to 21 wins. Your decisions? What is the dealer holding? Should I take a card? Should I stay?
Way to go, Reed.
You can bet between $5 and $10,000 per hand.
You mean 8. 8, easy 8, easy 8. Mark 8, point of 8.
The craps table is usually where the action heats up because more people can play. You can bet for the shooter on the pass line or against the shooter in the don't pass box. A high-energy table always draws a crowd.
Come on, shooter, just hold those dice. 2 cards.
The shooter tries to match the number on her previous roll. If 7 comes up first, she loses, and so does everyone who bet on her. That's called craps. There are 3 dealers, 2 to place bets and 1 to retrieve the dice and pay the winners.
12 crab dice, 12 crab, triple, 12 crab.
The seated boxman supervises and keeps an eye on thousands of dollars of chips. If the table stays hot like this one, no one will leave. That is as close to a sure thing as you'll ever get in a casino. If you don't like depending on others to keep your table hot, you can play at your own table, in your own room, at your own convenience, if you are a high roller.
7 Wonders of America is brought to you by Ernst & Young, from thought to finish. And by 1010-220. Dial it and all calls up to 20 minutes are only 99 cents.
Remember the days when we'd squash each other like bugs? Yeah. Remember when you'd steal our sales guys? And you'd borrow our patents. Now, my website links to your site. We're e-commerce partners.
At Ernst & Young, our objective financial advice can help with any new relationship so you can move ahead with confidence.
So you want to merge? Sure. You'll love working for me.
Ernst & Young, from thought to finish.
Hey,
We're out of teas. Let's roll up this dollar.
A buck? Are you kidding? We might lose it. Just a buck.
Guess you don't know about 10, 10, 220.
That's only 99 cents for all calls up to 20 minutes.
Yeah, and just 7 cents a minute after 20.
That's cheap. Do I have to sign up?
Nope, you just dial 10, 10, 220, then 1, and the number.
Wow, this dollar is worth something.
I better use the wood. Kind of pulled it.
Dial 10, 10, 220.
You're watching 7 Wonders of America on the Discovery Channel.
Hey! I brought something special.
Hope you're hungry. We are.
Come on, baby. Do that thing that you do.
Try this.
Incoming.
Thanks, Al. Really, when you think about it, you don't need bowls.
Oh, no, not at all.
Actually, Amy here had dinner planned.
Oh, that is so sweet. You guys still eat dinner? Huh?
Dreamery ice cream in 18 flavors. This could be a problem. This is a news break from Discovery.com.
At least 9 wildfires burned across Florida during the weekend, sending smoke drifting over Disney World. Officials were forced to close the southern stretch of Interstate 75 called Alligator Alley. By late Saturday, the fire was only 35% contained.
For the latest science news, go to Discovery.com News.
Smile. You're watching Adelphia, your link to laughter. Your link to Adelphia. We're in tune with what you want.
This month, Adelphia has it all. On HBO, Martin Lawrence's Living Large, Undercover, Big Mama's House. On Cinemax, Kevin Bacon's Life is Looking Up, The Air Up There. On Showtime, Samuel L. Jackson and Tommy Lee Jones expose a conspiracy, Rules of Engagement. And on the Movie Channel, Tommy Lee Jones and Ashley Judd discover a legal loophole, Double Jeopardy. For these movies and more, you've got to check out Adelphia.
Here at Bellagio, if certain discriminating guests do not want to gamble with the general guest population, they don't have to. If they gamble a lot of money, win or lose, Bellagio will comp their stay and pamper them into coming back. These high-end gamblers are called high rollers.
One of the reasons why a property like Bellagio was built was to pull in the high rollers. They want to know that they're staying at the place that everyone else wants to be staying, and they got it and the other guy didn't get it. A place like Bellagio is ground zero for that type of gambler.
In this intimate setting, it is not unusual for 70 baccarat hands to be wagered in 1 hour at $200,000 each. That's $14 million.
Good evening, and welcome to the Bellagio Baccarat Salon Privé. This room has been specially reserved for one person. The first game is the Baccarat. The 3 dealers in tuxedo, they deal to the player, they make sure that he has a good time, they pick and pay all bets. Standing behind the dealers are the 2 floor supervisors. They do ratings, they issue credit, and their general job is also for game protection. Also to the end of the table are the casino hosts. We have a roulette game in case the player decides he doesn't want to play Baccarat, he wants to play a little roulette. We also have a 21 game for him. If he feels like playing 21, maybe wants to change his luck a little bit. All this is specifically for the one player. If he decides he wants to have dinner, we have the butlers here. They provide him with drinks and dinner in the dining area.
High rollers enter through a gated secret tunnel. Their identity remains anonymous, but Bellagio did grant a first televised sneak peek at the villas where they stay.
Good evening. Welcome to the Bellagio Villas, where we create dreams. Welcome. This will be in the living room in which we'll be accommodating any cocktail parties for you during your stay. We do have the AMX control system in which you can control the living conditions of the room, and of course, summon your butler at your command. To the left here, we have a bar, which we can have set up in any way that you like, any preference of cocktails, liquors. We can also have a bartender 24 hours a day, or when you would like one. We have 2 bedrooms to choose from. This is the master bedroom with access to the patio, to the jacuzzi, swimming pool, and waterfall as well. This will be the ladies' bathroom, equipped with a sunken jacuzzi tub, towel warmers, and as well as cedar closets. Each villa is equipped with a salon for your private hair styling for the lady and for the gentleman. And in this room you'll find 2 beds, but the layout of the room is the same, so whatever convenience you would like, we'll be happy to set you up in either room. If you follow me, I'll show you to your dining room and to your kitchen, for which we can arrange private dinners, individual chefs, breakfast for 2 or breakfast for 10. We can have it catered in, or we can have it cooked in.
Butler service.
During your stay, there will be a butler on call 24 hours a day for whatever your needs would be.
Good afternoon, sir. Where would you like this served?
Most guests at Bellagio prefer to be seen and dine out. And why not? What once was an unsatisfying selection of restaurants in Las Vegas has become an art form here. If you want to sample one of only 17 5-star restaurants in North America, you come to Picasso for superior Mediterranean cuisine. And for the price of a meal, you get to gaze at original Picasso paintings. Julian Serrano is the executive chef. His standard of excellence must be achieved every night, every dish. To accomplish that, everyone has a precise responsibility. It is controlled mayhem.
Everything is done in the moment, nothing is done in advance. It means when I call the tickets, is when they start to cook. And we have a pastry chef, we have a sous chef in the pastry, we have a chef, myself, we have the chef de cuisine, we have a 2 sous chefs, we have a master cooks, we have a cooks, we have a prep cook, we have a pantry cook. I mean, we have altogether 26 people, and each person doing different things. You know, the kitchen is divided by a station. It's one station, the only thing they do is fish. Another station, the only thing is vegetable and soups. Another station, they do a sauce. Another station, they do it meat. I mean, every station, they have things to do. Not everybody running crazy, and what am I doing right now?
There is healthy dining competition at Bellagio because the best restaurants wanted to be here, including Aqua, one of San Francisco's finest. Its seafood is famous, and head chef Mark LaRusso makes sure it stays that way.
And this is the 1 ounce of 000 beluga caviar.
What we really tried to do from the beginning of Aqua was set a certain standard for seafood. You're taking classical seafood dishes, doing plays on them, but using bold flavors, trying to balance ingredients. And when you start to cook like that, you're talking about a fairly complex style of cooking.
A little mini portion of our caviar parfait.
No, I just needed 1 double. I got an extra one. I'm going to give it back to you. Okay. On 7 pot pies, guys.
This is our main lobster pot pie with sauteed spinach and winter vegetables and a truffle cream sauce.
Knowing that, you know, just within your own hotel, no matter where they dine, it has to be at a certain level so you can keep up with the people next door, and that's always good, friendly competition.
Bellagio is the most beautiful place on the Las Vegas Strip. You come for the conservatory, for the flowers, you come for the art gallery. Oh, my favorite part are the dancing waters outside. I could stand there all day and listen to the music.
But even that dancing, cascading water gets a personal touch. The pipes and fittings need repair and cleaning. That 240-foot super shooter can't be off even 1 degree. If you see these divers in Lake Bellagio, you'll understand they too are part of the grand romantic plan to take you higher.
There's a time when I must follow that road into tomorrow, or I'll never be free to love again.
Our second wonder may not have the romance of a big Las Vegas casino, but it is glamorous in its own dirty way. It's the biggest mining truck in the world.
There's a tsunami on the horizon, a gigantic wave of epic proportions. It started with computers, swelled into websites and PDAs. Now smartphones, smart cars, smart buildings, and it's headed right towards you with a force and power untold. It's the future of e-business. Do you have the right software? Surf's up. It's a different kind of world. You need a different kind of software.
You're watching the Discovery Channel.
The power of being there. Going anywhere you want. Seeing anyone you want. That's the power Choice Hotels gives you. And with thousands of locations in the U.S. and Canada, you can always find a great deal and a great place to stay. And now when you book a 2-night stay in advance and pay with your MasterCard, you get a $5 gas card. The power of being there has never been better. $5 gas card. Choice Hotels.
This is the Discovery Channel. You're watching the 7 Wonders of America.
Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute, there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid.
On now, 7 Wonders of America on the Discovery Channel.
If only your house could talk, what would it say?
I've seen quite a few parties out here, let me tell you.
The way I see it, the deck is just like a porch, only better.
What's your vision of the perfect backyard? At Lowe's, we can help you put it all together. From a wide selection of name brand grills to styles of patio furniture everyone will love.
I like to think of myself as the room with the fresh air.
Lowe's, improving home improvement.
Now through Memorial Day, spend $250 on your Lowe's card and get 6 months, no payments, no finance charges.
Every Tuesday night on the Discovery Channel, you're on the case. Look beyond the obvious. Unearth clues invisible to the naked eye. One night of discovery, 3 real-life dramas. The Prosecutors, The New Detectives, The FBI Files. Real people, real stories. You're on the case. Tuesdays beginning at 8 Eastern and Pacific on the Discovery Channel.
Our second wonder is the largest mining truck in the world. This is the Caterpillar 797, at work in the world's largest open-pit copper mine run by Kennecott, Utah Copper. At 2.5 miles wide and 3/4 of a mile deep, Bingham Canyon Mine is the largest man-made excavation on Earth. So large, in fact, you can see it from space. Since 1903, Bingham Canyon has produced more copper than any mine in history. Each ton of ore mined here yields only about 12 pounds of copper. Yet every year, Bingham Canyon produces about 320,000 tons of copper. all because copper is a vital component in building and automotive wiring, heating and cooling systems, plumbing, computers, even household cooking items. The copper ore that becomes metal in the smelter and refinery today may one day reside in a commercial jet, or your car, or your frying pan. But every single ounce of it starts its journey right here, in the back of a truck.
With the situation we have here, the more tons that we can move, the larger the truck, the better we are.
Which is one reason why Kennecott Utah Copper operates the Caterpillar 797. At 24 feet high and 48 feet long, only the most modernized mines can accommodate its monstrous size. Able to haul over 360 tons, this Leviathan is a model of efficiency.
In the past, working the mine was very, very labor intensive. Within the mine itself, there were about 200 miles of rail track. And sometimes it would take hours for a train to exit the mine, as it would literally circle the mine seeking one of the tunnel exits. At the same time, there were over 500 people employed in the mine on a daily basis just to move the trackage, because where your railroad track was today is where you had to mine tomorrow. That was very efficient for many, many decades, but then became very inefficient.
In the 1960s, Kennecott started replacing its rail cars with haulage trucks, initially having a load capacity of 65 tons. Today, Kennecott operates a fleet of 66 haulage trucks that can carry from 255 to 360 tons. Caterpillar developed the 797 in response to mining companies seeking a means to reduce costs in large-scale operations. As shovels outgrow trucks, digging more earth with each scoop, trucks become inefficient. They fill too quickly and require more frequent trips to unload, consuming time and fuel. So when mining companies like Kennecott started investing in shovels that could move close to 100 tons in a single scoop, Caterpillar, the world's largest manufacturer of mining equipment, was determined to create a truck that could keep up.
We wanted to come up with some new innovations, but still we wanted to rely on the success that we had over 35 years with our previous trucks.
We attended different meetings with Caterpillar, and they asked us some of the things that we felt that the truck needed. Things like easier access for the drivers, just more or less the easy, convenient things for a driver to do.
They also helped us with the design of the cab. In fact, we wanted it to be operator friendly, and we took the mock-up of the cab to the different mine sites and had them critique it for us.
But by deciding to build their largest truck ever, Caterpillar created for itself new, unexpected challenges.
At the time, there was no tire available and there was no engine available to power these.
The solution was to design a new engine and tire, powerful and large enough to move the behemoth that Caterpillar had conceived. The engine is powered from 1,800-gallon fuel tanks and can burn up to 163 gallons per hour. With the help of Michelin and Bridgestone Firestone, new tires were designed, standing over 12 feet tall and costing up to $30,000. It took only 18 months to design and build. At the proving grounds in Tucson, Arizona, a prototype 797 was assembled and tested. With 3,400 horsepower under the hood, the 797 can reach a top speed of 40 miles per hour. So how do you stop a small house when it's going 40 miles per hour? It takes 50 disc brakes, 20 in the front, 30 in the rear. Still, despite its massive size, the 797 remains easy to maneuver, even when overloaded. Throw in power steering, air conditioning, and an AM/FM radio, and you've got a $3.5 million luxury earth mover. It is so big, it has to be shipped in pieces by 7 rail cars or 12 trucks, and then takes 30 days to assemble on site. These two 797s, delivered to Bingham Canyon in the summer of 1999, were the first two to be field tested.
Well, the 797 has been well accepted with our drivers here. We have a numerous amount of them that's task trained to operate that truck, and they all really enjoy it.
My name is Luciano Gonzalez. I've been working here for 42 years. Been driving for about 38 years. And when we first started driving up here, we had to have some old trucks. It was a pretty rough ride compared to the ones we've got now. We used to go home with a backache every night. This truck here is really nice. It's just like driving a Cadillac.
Gigantic shovels, mammoth trucks, every little boy's dream. But at Bingham Canyon, this dream is not just for little boys.
When I was a little kid, my dad brought me up here to the mine, and I told him, one day I'm going to drive one of them trucks, and he told me, you can do whatever you want to do. And here I am. I'm a third generation Kennecott kid.
Kennecott operates its mine 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Trucks run continuously, even through shift changes. They frequently run 350 hours at a stretch before being brought into the shop for preventative maintenance. The 797 is no exception. So how do you rotate the tires on something that weighs well over 1 million pounds?
Well, actually, changing the oil on these big trucks and tires is a lot like you do down at your own shop or wherever you take your car. Everything's just bigger.
Fixing giant machines takes giant machinery of its own. Forklifts are required to move the 10,000-pound tires, and engine parts need to be lowered into place by crane. Within this maintenance bay, workers can service up to 8 trucks at once. And once repaired and refueled, the 797 can get back to doing what it was made to do, hauling mountains. If you ever need to move a mountain, this is the truck that can do it. But if you want to move people across a bay, you need a bridge.
At last, come.
From the director of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Everything will be just fine.
A film by Ang Lee. Chosen. Now playing at bmwfilms.com.
You're watching the Discovery Channel. Tomorrow, the prosecutors, The Missing Heiress.
Ice cream in 18 flavors. This could be a problem.
Hey, we're out of teas. Let's roll up this $1.
$1? Are you kidding? We might lose it.
Just $1. Guess you don't know about 10, 10, 220.
That's only 99 cents for all calls up to 20 minutes.
Yeah, and just 7 cents a minute after 20.
That's cheap. Do I have to sign up?
Nope, you just dial 10, 10, 220, then 1, and the number.
Wow, this $1 is worth something.
I better use the wood. Kind of pulled it.
Dial 1010-220.
You're watching the Discovery Channel.
Remember the days when we'd squash each other like bugs?
Yeah. Remember when you'd steal our sales guys?
And you'd borrow our patents. Now, my website links to your site.
We're e-commerce partners.
At Ernst & Young, our objective financial advice can help with any new relationship so you can move ahead with confidence.
So you want to merge?
Sure. You'll love working for me.
Ernst & Young, from thought to finish.
Private Holland and his dog here are your new scout team.
I thought you said we were getting a recon unit.
No, the canine's perfect for this job.
This Friday, Animal Planet pays tribute to a different species of soldier, the war dog.
Rain signaling that I'm on a mine.
In an Animal Planet original movie, see how a dog named Rain...
I can't go back out there with lunch.
...showed why he was truly man's best friend.
wasn't for that dog, I wouldn't be here.
Don't miss the Animal Planet original movie, Rain, Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Pacific, only on Animal Planet.
10 years of great moments. 10 years of great play. 10 years of great baseball. Celebrate a decade of excellence. The Atlanta Braves Great Baseball Tour, all season long on TBS Superstation.
Adelphia Media Services, your link to customers. Contact us to find out how to advertise your business on today's hottest cable programming.
Adelphia long distance is so easy. It's simple. It's 8 cents a minute. 8. 8. All the time. Like I said, 8. No monthly please. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
8 cents a minute, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. No monthly fees, no access codes, and 6-second billing. Why pay for time you're not on the phone?
See how easy that is? Adelphia. Simple, affordable, long distance. So what are you waiting for?
Wonder number 3 is the story of a bridge and the people who love it.
It is awesome to see it the first time.
With the water, I see it, it's beautiful. It's beautiful and it's big.
And it's romantic. It's got a romantic side to it,
Yes.
I think.
And pictures doesn't do it justice.
I think I'll remember the San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge the rest of my life. I love those first impressions.
The Golden Gate Bridge does far more than connect San Francisco with the north. It connects to people and moves them emotionally. People who visit the Golden Gate Bridge, whether they live in the San Francisco Bay Area or travel here, describe their time on the bridge as walking with an old friend. There are older suspension bridges, longer and taller ones, but none of comparable beauty and history, and none that have inspired so much affection. For the Golden Gate Bridge, the love affair began in the beginning. Despite the hardship of the Great Depression, the people risked their homes and businesses to borrow the $35 million to build the bridge. When doubters called it the bridge that couldn't be built, the people embraced this perilous task, ignoring strong seas, 60-mile-per-hour winds, and persistent cold. 4 years later, in 1937, the Golden Gate Bridge was spanning an ocean and a bay, a symbol of hope for the ages. It became known as the People's Bridge. When the bridge opened, everyone wanted to experience it for himself. Today, it is no different. This vibrant Art Deco wonder is a timeless modern world treasure. Its celebrity may reach the masses, but the imprint it leaves on all who see it is unique and personal.
Good morning. Welcome to the Golden Gate Bridge.
City Guides is a tour group sponsored by the San Francisco Public Library.
There was a lot of talk about building a Golden Gate Bridge for many, many, many years.
They preserve and perpetuate the city's history and folklore.
I just want to know how much flexibility was designed into the bridge.
There was a lot of flexibility built into the bridge.
Tourists learned about the struggle to conceive and build the bridge. They walked that majestic span. Their admiration was contagious because this bridge has an endearing quality that brings people together.
If you are raised in an area which is in the middle of the country or not near an ocean, to not only see the ocean and its expanse, but to have the opportunity to walk over an ocean must be an incredible feeling. It's a wonderful thing. It's lovely to see the world come to see it.
Sonoma and Napa. Okay. They just came here from Burma about a week ago.
All day long, they come without interruption. Tourist buses, families on holiday, and lots of people who just show up for a good time.
It just seemed to me like a kind of balcony on creation. The Golden Gate Bridge really is our Statue of Liberty. For anybody who is lucky enough to sail in or out of the Golden Gate, seeing the Golden Gate Bridge looming above them is really one of the great thrills.
The German ship Albatross is on a world cruise. After 3 stormy days at sea, it is slipping into San Francisco 5 hours late. Despite weariness and seasickness, passengers flocked on deck to photograph that magic moment that many had been anticipating for months.
This bridge is wonderful. This feeling to go under there, it was wonderful.
It was the first time passing the Golden Gate Bridge from the sea, and it was a really great moment for me.
The next day, passengers depart, joining a landscape that has perfected the blending of engineering, architecture, and art. But there are those who would disturb this harmony.
Why'd you do it, Woody? Save the redwoods, man.
This is a transportation corridor. It's not an amusement park, and it shouldn't be a scene for people to make their political statements.
Actor Woody Harrelson decided to protest logging in the redwoods by climbing the cables to hang a banner. Susan Zitron and Don Woods will never forget that day.
It was the first time I'd gone on the Marin Airporter and the first time across the bridge where I didn't have to drive, where I could just watch what was going around me.
I was going to Florida to visit my family for Thanksgiving for the week, and I realized that we had come to a complete stop, and there was bumper-to-bumper traffic in like 4 lanes. And I said out loud, "What's going on here?"
Don seized the opportunity.
And I thought, she is really pretty. I didn't notice any wedding rings, and so I said, I've got to talk to her.
He was talking to me while I was sitting in my seat, and all I could see was his eyes.
While Woody climbed, Susan and Don talked about careers, about family, about life.
And so what I said was, I wanted to call her, and I had sweaty palms, so I knew I really wanted to talk to her.
After dating for 5 months,
We went for a walk across the bridge because Don had never walked the span. And when we came back mid-span, he said to me, do you really want to marry me? And I said, of course I want to marry you.
Woody Harrelson was arrested and fined. Susan and Don got married. Local media picked up the story, and the Marin Airporter Bus Company gave them a free lifetime pass.
And in a way, the bridge itself changed our lives.
800,000 people were drawn together to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Golden Gate Bridge and nearly loved it to death. Dan Mohn was chief bridge engineer from 1980 to 1994. On May 27, 1987, he rode the original elevator 8.5 minutes to the top of the South Tower to monitor the festivities.
We closed the bridge between 5 a.m. and 10 a.m. and allowed people to duplicate the bridge walk that had taken place 50 years earlier. And people were coming from the north and people were coming from the south, and as they came together in the center of the bridge, they just started jamming tight. And I watched all of this happen from up here.
There were probably about 250,000 people on the bridge, and pretty soon they couldn't move, and pretty soon it was getting hard to breathe. People who had their bicycles with them actually started throwing them off the side of the bridge.
Mohn was most concerned about public safety, but he was also concerned about something else.
There was a noticeable deflection taking place. It was the greatest load the bridge had ever carried up to that time.
And actually, it was getting very, very tense because the suspension cables, which are supposed to be taut, were starting to go loose. And the bridge was starting to move in ways that nobody had felt it move before.
The public was never in danger of a bridge collapse, but only Dan Mohn knew that. The bridge span was designed to safely displace up to 27 feet, 2 more than it was doing. But he had good reason to reconfirm 50-year-old plans.
It was also designed, they said at that time, to withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds. We later found out that that wasn't true. And it was also additionally designed to withstand the earthquakes as they knew them in 1929. And we found out that that isn't true.
This seismic retrofit project should be completed by 2009, refortifying the structure in case a sizable quake epicenter hits close to San Francisco. But Mohn believes 100-mile-per-hour winds could cause severe damage because the handrailing design is too obstructive. One man is quite happy with that design. When the oceanside railing was replaced due to weathering, he bought it. And guess what it is now?
This is the original steel that was put on the bridge in 1936 and 1937.
Richard Bulon has all 200,000 pounds of the historic steel.
Each piece is numbered. They're all limited edition. And They all come with letters of authenticity, and once we run out, that's it.
He began the one-of-a-kind Golden Gate Design and Furniture Company. Now you can have breakfast with the Golden Gate Bridge or sleep with it. Tables, lamps, headboards. Who would want this furniture? In a word, everyone.
A lot of people have emotional ties to the Golden Gate Bridge. They got proposed to, they got married on, they flew over it, they drove across it, they sailed underneath it. Also, there's a lot of San Francisco natives that move away and they want a little piece of home.
They like the chisel marks and weathering, any imperfection. The rails are stored at Merit Metal, where they are cut, welded, ground, and painted into a finished product. The Bridge District helped match the original International Orange paint color formula. They even placed an order. The natural question is, what happens when you run out of pedestrian handrailing?
When I run out of steel, I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
No matter what pleasure you get from the Golden Gate Bridge, most bridge enthusiasts just want to be on it.
They used to come out dressed out in top hats and black coat, and the women were wearing long dresses with all sorts of fancy hairdo, and they would go out to one of the towers and they would try and get behind the tower so we wouldn't see them, and they would lay out a big spread of food with champagne, and it seems to me they would bring out cellos and whatever and play some music.
Since 1977 I've been coming and having parties on the Golden Gate Bridge.
One year, Catherine's birthday party attracted 300 people. They stopped the parties, except for this reunion.
We got run off by the Bridge Authority a couple of times in the past.
That was because he was fencing.
Oh, yeah.
And tails and top hats along the road.
And we're making the most that we possibly can of our natural environment. This is why I live here.
If it wasn't for us, this would be L.A. Really. And we don't want to live in L.A. No.
We'd have to go out every year and ask them to leave, and they always did. It was harmless, but once again, they didn't have a permit to be there, and they were actually blocking the sidewalk for other people. Anything that happens in a major city is going to happen here. Some of it not so good, most of it is good.
I never get tired of the bridge. Whether I'm crossing it or whether I'm looking at it from a distance, it's always different, it's always inspirational. And that's really, I think, what makes it the greatest work of art in San Francisco.
The Golden Gate Bridge is in some way attached forever to the lives of everyone who sees it. That old friend is as charming and giving as the day you met.
I lost my heart in San Francisco.
Our next wonder is on the other side of America, and it too has become a national icon.
7 Wonders of America is brought to you by Lowe's Home Improvement Warehouse, Lowe's improving home improvement, and by IBM, taking e-business and your business to the next level.
If only your house could talk, what would it say?
I've seen quite a few parties out here, let me tell you.
The way I see it, the deck is just like a porch, only better.
What's your vision of the perfect backyard? At Lowe's, we can help you put it all together. From a wide selection of name brand grills to styles of patio furniture everyone will love.
I like to think of myself as the room with the fresh air.
Lowe's, improving home improvement.
Now through Memorial Day, spend $250 on your Lowe's card and get 6 months, no payments, no finance charges.
There's a tsunami on the horizon, a gigantic wave of epic proportions. It started with computers, swelled into websites and PDAs. Now smartphones, smart cars, smart buildings, and it's headed right towards you with a force and power untold. It's the future of e-business. Do you have the right software? Surf's up. It's a different kind of world. You need a different kind of software.
You're watching 7 Wonders of America on the Discovery Channel.
You expect to see on a cruise. Want to see more? Check out RoyalCaribbean.com and get out there.
You're watching the Discovery Channel.
Who makes the best minivan? With multi-stage airbags, available side airbags, four-wheel ABS, and an advanced safety cage body structure, it's safe to say Dodge Grand Caravan is the best minivan ever. See, compare, drive, Caravan. Now with a $2,000 cash allowance or low 0.9 financing.
Private Holland and his dog here are your new scout team. Thought you said we were getting a recon unit. No, the canine's perfect for this job.
This Friday, Animal Planet pays tribute to a different species of soldier, the war dog.
Rain signaling that I'm on a mine.
In an Animal Planet original movie, see how a dog named Rain,
I can't go back out there without you.
showed why he was truly man's best friend.
If it wasn't for that dog, I wouldn't be here.
Don't miss the Animal Planet original movie, Rain, Friday at 8 Eastern, 7 Pacific, only on Animal Planet.
Climb on board, hold onto your stomachs, and prepare for the ride of your life. This Memorial Day, the Discovery Channel gives you a front row seat aboard the newest, fastest, and scariest rides in the world. All new world premieres featuring the most eye-popping, jaw-dropping scream machines ever built. Thrills, chills, and spills. Next Monday at 8 Eastern and Pacific on the Discovery Channel. And head to discovery.com now to build your very own roller coaster.
Every year, David Murbach takes a helicopter ride to find a Christmas tree for our fourth wonder, Rockefeller Center.
Well, we look for the giant Christmas tree for Rockefeller Center, and it's not an easy task.
He needs to find a Norwegian spruce tall enough and shapely enough to fit in with the grand surroundings of Rockefeller Center, the famous complex of buildings in Manhattan. Rockefeller Center is a National Historic Landmark, but also a symbol of American pride and achievement.
Your heart just swells when you see this.
This is why this building is one of the wonders of America. This is the greatest spot in Manhattan, the top of the GE building. You're right in the heart of New York City. And there it is, the greatest city in the world, and it's right at your feet.
It's an impressive place. I really like it. It's kind of a peaceful enclave in the middle of the city, and it's strange how they did that.
For one thing, Rockefeller has its very own street. It is closed to traffic, so there are no cars whizzing through. And there are gardens not only at ground level, but high above Manhattan. Seen from 100,000 windows, they are urban oases with trees and even goldfish ponds. It is a place that is full of surprises for a first-time visitor.
We were just walking up the street there, and I'm looking, and I'm seeing white going, wait, it can't be. It is. I've never been on ice skates, being from Arizona.
The ice skating rink right in the middle of the city makes Rockefeller Center so enchanting and romantic.
I first started skating at Rockefeller Rink when I was about 5 years old. I told my parents, when I get married, I want to be married on the ice at Rockefeller Center.
The holiday atmosphere with flags, skaters, and music makes it easy to forget that Rockefeller Center is primarily an office complex, a place where people go to actually work in the 6.5 million square feet of offices. Not many office buildings are tourist attractions.
It's big. Well, I've never been here before. It's something else.
Rockefeller Center occupies 22 acres, more than a city block, and comprises 19 individual buildings. The 70-story, 850 feet tall GE building is its centerpiece.
I've got neck ache at my age. No, it's lovely.
Beautiful. I mean, I look at these skyscrapers and there's something else.
But that's not all, folks. Deep under your feet, Rockefeller Center reaches 6 levels down. On the second floor underground is the country's first shopping mall. Elegant stores and concourses line the corridors that connect the buildings. Rockefeller Center even has its own subway stop that brings some of the 250,000 people who visit and work in the complex every day. Rockefeller Center is such an integral part of life in New York that it is hard to believe that these majestic steel and limestone buildings owe their existence to an historical accident. Had things gone as planned back in the 1920s, there would have been an opera house in their place.
I think this is just as good. The Opera House is special, but this area
has answered to the call for what we wanted.
It was not a call that was heard loudly in the late 20s. It was the Jazz Age, a time of affluence and extravagance, as well as prohibition. The president of the Metropolitan Opera, Otto Kahn, wanted a new opera house uptown and had grand plans for a new building on a site between 5th and 6th Avenues. It was a run-down neighborhood of brownstones, speakeasies, and bordellos, which was ripe for a bit of urban renewal.
Otto Kahn, he envisioned a city within a city of department stores, apartment houses, office buildings, all around his opera house. And he, of course, couldn't do that alone.
Kahn had to find a way to finance his grand opera project and approached John D. Rockefeller Jr., the son of the Standard Oil magnate who was one of the world's richest men. John D. Jr. was persuaded to support the development.
It was John D. Rockefeller Jr. who actually put his name on the dotted line, and I believe that was in the spring of 1929. And nobody could know what was going to happen in October.
On Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, the stock market crashed, and all the plans for a new opera house and commercial center collapsed. John D. Rockefeller Jr., the only real investor, was left holding the bag.
Well, it certainly came as a great surprise. The Metropolitan Opera didn't have the money to go forward with it, but Father had taken the lease for 99 years, I think.
They realized this was a crisis. This was a huge crisis on such a scale as we had never seen.
So he wondered what to do with it. He was a deeply religious person. He had a great moral sense, and he felt a sense of moral responsibility to the community and the world, and Father decided to go ahead with it.
And I really don't understand why Rockefeller went through with this. It took a lot of guts, you know, but my goodness, that man had guts.
So Rockefeller went ahead and directed a team of architects to design a commercial center, which would give him maximum beauty consistent with maximum profit.
He wanted something fresh and new and clean. Very American, very 20th century.
In May 1930, the demolition of the old neighborhood began. 228 buildings were leveled, 4,000 tenants were displaced, and about 100,000 truckloads of debris were carted away.
At one point, there were high barriers where the construction was going on, but Father was interested in seeing what was happening and found a little tiny hole. So he thought other people would have the same interest, so he made bigger holes so that people could watch the construction.
The streets looked like bridges across a deep hole before the foundations were poured. If the people who had been forced to move were angry, there were 75,000 construction workers who were very happy to have a job when the economy was sliding into the Great Depression. At the end of 1931, the workers celebrated Christmas and their good luck at having a paycheck with a tree erected on the building lot. That spontaneous celebration grew into the tradition of the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. Over time, it has become quite an operation.
The helicopter facilitates finding the tree. It enables us to cover miles of ground.
David Murbach spotted a tree belonging to the Hetty family and went to ask for their spruce.
I just hoped it was tall enough for them to take. I was going to add a few feet on if I thought it might help.
It took 3 years before the tree was big and full enough to be cut down. In the year 2000, with its branches wrapped in bandages, the tree was put on a special truck and taken to Manhattan.
With the picking of a Christmas tree for Rockefeller Center, we were part of their history.
History did not seem kind to John D. Rockefeller Jr. in the early 30s. The country's economic outlook worsened, and Rockefeller personally had to borrow large amounts of money as the cost of the project far exceeded what he had expected. But when everything was going down, Rockefeller Center was going up.
I was a teenager and I was living at home, The house that my parents owned and that I lived in was at 10 West 54th Street. My bedroom was on the 5th floor of the house and looked south, so that I actually watched it going up.
And what an exciting spectacle it was. Steelworkers were balancing on beams high above the streets of Manhattan, working with enormous loads from ever more dizzying heights as the tallest building grew towards 70 stories. The construction of the steel and limestone buildings proceeded at record speed on several buildings at once. Already in May 1933, the main building opened. And Rockefeller Center, with its 14 original buildings, was complete in 1939, when John D. Rockefeller Jr. drove in the ceremonial last rivet.
It did represent such a huge effort. I think Father felt very pleased with the way it worked out.
But the critics did not.
It was a flop when it opened, and nobody liked it. The modernists didn't like it because it was too traditionalist. The traditionalists didn't like it because it was too modern. They left at Rockefeller Center, and now they're all waiting in line to get in.
I'm in awe. I love it. I think it's great.
If John D. Rockefeller Jr. had achieved maximum beauty, there was still the goal of maximum profitability to be concerned about. Just about the only thing that thrived during the Depression was radio.
I'll be loving you always.
RCA, the radio giant, had decided to move its offices into the tallest building at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. More communications companies followed, and the Associated Press building was just across the street. Just as today, with NBC News housed in what is now called the GE building, so much of the communications and entertainment business was housed at Rockefeller Center that the complex became known as Radio City. It soon became a household name all over America, partly due to Radio City Music Hall and the famous precision dancing Rockettes. But there was one nagging concern. The underground stores didn't do well. They went out of business, and the problem was the sunken plaza, meant to be the entrance to the mall.
That sunken plaza was the biggest headache. There are pictures of people roaming around down there, looking absolutely moonstruck. They don't know why they're there. They look like they're lost.
Desperate situations called for desperate measures. So when an inventor from Cleveland came up with the radical idea of an artificial ice skating pond, the Rockefeller managers decided to try it as a temporary measure. It opened at Christmas time 1936. Instantly, people loved to skate there among the skyscrapers.
It was done over 60 years ago, and everything still fits in today. It's just done with such great style.
In front, together, beside, together, behind, together, without moving the rest of the body. Good, Holly.
When I skate at Rockefeller Center, there is a special feeling, because I'll see someone down on one knee, and I really won't think twice, because that's the nature of skating. People do fall.
And sometimes in love.
I realize he's not falling, he's proposing. And his fiancée is standing in front of him, and finally he pops the question, and everyone waits while they hold their breath and hoping that she'll say yes.
And talk about romance, Ricky Samuels made good on her promise and got very special permission to be married on the ice.
It was a beautiful wedding day. You can't help but smile. It is a really enchanting place.
Adding to the enchantment is the statue of Prometheus, which occasionally needs a little sprucing up. With a new coat of gold, he becomes the focal point of the plaza.
Prometheus does have something wonderful. He's a bronze statue, and he floats. And because he floats, I think we float with him.
Prometheus floats, Atlas is burdened. And everywhere outside the buildings, as well as inside, there are monumental artworks and beautiful details.
It feels extravagant, more extravagant than most office buildings, and artistic.
Mr. Rockefeller, who built this building, took that all into consideration to make it a wonder spot of the world, actually. Our artwork is something that you won't find in any buildings around the world. We are almost, and I considered it a museum in its own right.
It must be the biggest museum in the world and hard to keep clean. Over the years, Rockefeller Center has grown to 19 buildings, but the original complex remains as pristine as when John D. Rockefeller Jr. built it.
It's hard for me to believe that one person did this greatness.
The Rockefeller family no longer owns any part of the architectural entity that bears their name. John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s youngest son, David Rockefeller, still works in the GE building, but he rents.
I think Father would have felt that what happened was logical. I can't imagine that he would have been displeased. I feel rather philosophical about it. The world changes.
But one thing that seems to change very little is Christmas at Rockefeller Center, where the Christmas tree is raised in front of the GE building.
It's truly an architectural stage. The platform of 30 Rockefeller Plaza, surrounded by the buildings, is the way a set designer would design a theatrical set. And to have the tree center stage is what's happening here.
The Rockefeller Christmas has become the symbol of Christmas, at least for New Yorkers. Several 100,000 people jam into Rockefeller Plaza, waiting for the tree lighting ceremony.
Never been down to see a tree or anything until ours was down there. Just being there and seeing the enormity of the whole area and where the tree went was pretty overwhelming.
Many times, David Rockefeller has been on hand to light the tree at the end of the official countdown.
They start counting 10, 9, 8, 7, and the crowd starts coming along, and then at 1 there's a pause, and then the tree jumps in the light. It's really fabulous.
But the Hetty's perfect tree had a secret little flaw.
I cut some of the lower branches off so I could ride under with the mower. So I noticed where they were missing, but probably nobody else would.
It's really fabulous. And what more could you ask for than the grandest stage in the center of New York City, in the center of the world?
Just as all of this started out as the biggest commercial center in America, our next wonder was built as the nation's biggest shopping mall.
Hey, we're out of teas. Let's roll up this $1.
$1? Are you kidding? We might lose it.
Just $1. Guess you don't know about 10, 10, 220.
That's only 99 cents for all calls up to 20 minutes.
Yeah, and just 7 cents a minute after 20.
That's cheap. Do I have to sign up?
Nope, you just dial 10, 10, 220, then 1, and the number.
Wow, this $1 is worth something.
I better use the wood. Kind of pulled it.
Dial 1010-220.
Hey! I brought something special.
Hope you're hungry. We are.
Come on, baby. Do that thing that you do.
Try this.
Incoming. Thanks, Al.
Really, when you think about it, you don't need bowls.
Oh, no, not at all. Actually, Amy here had dinner planned.
Oh, that is so sweet. You guys still eat dinner? Huh?
Dreamery ice cream in 18 flavors. This could be a problem.
You're watching 7 Wonders of America on the Discovery Channel.
Remember the days when we'd squash each other like bugs?
Yeah. Remember when you'd steal our sales, guys?
And you'd borrow our patents. Now, my website links to your site.
We're e-commerce partners.
At Ernst & Young, our objective financial advice can help with any new relationship so you can move ahead with confidence.
So, you want to merge?
Sure. You'll love working for me.
Ernst & Young, from thought to finish.
You're watching the Discovery Channel.
Your passenger is carrying $2 million in stolen diamonds.
Is it true?
I swallowed them.
Buckle up.
A film by John Frankenheimer. Ambush.
playing at BMW.